Hello, I'm Peter Reinhart, and welcome to Pizza Quest. And we say on Pizza Quest that we celebrate artisanship wherever we find it. And so our focus today is going to be on quest, not on pizza. And our quest and our celebration of artisanship will be with Charles Wekselbaum of Charlito's Cocina. We're going to be talking about salami and charcuterie, right? Welcome, Charles, and thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here with you.
Charlito, which obviously is what little Charlie, right? Is that you?
Yeah, that's me.
So before we get into tasting, because I know one thing I'm really looking forward to today is you sent me a sample of some of your essentially artisan style salamis, and I have a couple
Yeah,
questions before we get going, but I want to hear sort of the whole Charlito story. But before we get into that,
yeah.
can you clear up one confusion in my mind? Is this word charcuterie is becoming very trendy, and there's a lot of charcuteries opening up. What's the difference between a charcuterie and a salami or salumeria or whatever the other term is?
Wow, I mean, it's a great question, and I mean, I guess you ask 100 people, you get 100 different answers, but in my mind, it's just the language. One is the word in French, and one is basically the word in Italian.
Then
And there's some different connotations for each one, but that's kind of how I think about it.
so salami and charcuterie are basically the same. It's one category of cured meats. Is that essentially it?
I would say, salumi, because salami refers to a specific type of salumi,
Uh,
or a specific type of charcuterie. So, I would say so. The broad terms are charcuterie. The way I think about them are charcuterie, which kind of refers to any sort of further processed meat, starting with raw material and evolving it into something else. And salumi is sort of the Italian counterpart that refers to essentially any sort of type of processed meat. And then salami is a type of processed meat. It's a little more specific.
the
So,
specific, we're going to
and
get to
salami usually refers to ground. Yeah, we'll get to it, but you know,
this.
yeah, salumi and charcuterie are the broad terms, and salami is a more specific, I guess, a more specific term.
Right. And today you're going to take me on a tasting tour of at least three, maybe four of your salamis, and we're
Yeah,
going to do a
yeah,
deep dive in, talk about what makes them unique and special and how you came up with the flavor profiles. But first, you
can't
didn't
wait.
start out as a salumi maker, as you had
Yeah,
a prior life. Tell us about your journey and how you became, sort of focused in
yeah,
the new phase of your life as in New York. You're located where, in New York City?
yeah. Well, right now I'm located in the Hudson Valley, so
Oh,
I moved up here a couple of years ago. But yeah, I'm born and raised in New York City, and when I started Charlitos, I started Charlitos, out of an apartment in Queens where I was living with two friends of mine back in 2011, which feels ancient
yeah.
now, but which is a crazy concept. But yeah, Charlito started. So yeah, as you mentioned, I don't come from a long line of salami makers and charcuterie makers and all that. Probably one of the few out there that doesn't have much history before my generation. I was raised in a Cuban Jewish household in New York City. My dad was a Cuban immigrant, who came here in the 1960s or came to New York in the 1960s. He opened what started out as a hardware and houseware store, small hardware and houseware store in Manhattan, and over the years it evolved into like an anything for the home store. Started adding different departments, and I really grew up in that store. So that was my first introduction to business, and there was a lot of there wasn't any cooking or any food necessarily in there, but there was a lot of tools that you need to make food. So there was a ton of pots and pans and every houseware and gadget, and the biggest and the best in potato peelers,
Right.
that that kind
Had
of
the
thing. And
tools.
so I grew, as a tool. So sort of just grew up in that environment, very sort of, and the store was a very special place. Um, and but and yeah.
The foods of your home. Like, what kind of foods did you grow up with? Was the Cuban influence very big? Was it Spanish? Was the Jewish aspect? How did it all come together to create something unique?
Yeah, no, I mean, my mom was the one who was really into cooking and food. My dad, I think I saw him cook one meal in my life, and it was toast and a fried egg, and he burnt the toast, and and I don't remember the egg, to be honest with you. It wasn't, but so
Forgettably.
he wasn't so into. It was a forgettable, exactly. But I mean, he loved to eat, but he wasn't so into cooking. My mother was the one who loved cooking, and who loved food, and I think who really sparked my interest. A family, family weekend would be like, visiting the different markets around the city. We had this family tradition where every Sunday we'd go to Chinatown as a family and just order a bunch of different foods and try them. And, it was like one of those places where, they give you the menu in Chinese. And then, if you go there enough and you become a regular, then they know
Yeah.
that you can't read the Chinese, but the waiter comes over, helps you translate, and he says, try
Yeah.
this, try this, try this, and that was, that was really like those became some of my warmest and most inspiring food memories. That was the first time, 8 or 9 years old, where I thought, wow, like this is really, I mean, the food is so interesting. I found myself getting excited about it, and then as I got older, you know, I just realized that my idea of fun always food related. It was like I reached a certain point where it was like, Saturday night, all right, I'm gonna go wander into some random neighborhood and, a new supermarket, and it's like, and I
Oh,
realized that, a lot of my friends weren't doing the same thing, but it was always very exciting to me, an idea of, what my idea of fun was. Um, it became clear to me at an sort of when I was a teenager that I really wanted to work with food. I didn't know in what capacity, but I was fascinated by food. I always I loved the sort of the like the diverse foodscape of New York was incredible to me. And just it I learned what an incredible form of expression it is, and like what an incredible form of like keeping traditions alive it is, and what an incredible form of connection it is, and how it's really just a vehicle to bring people together, in so many different aspects. And so yeah, this is like a lot of people, I just caught the bug and was so and felt like food was incredibly powerful medium that maybe one day when I grew up I could work with it. um and and then, as time went on, my dad, I was super very close with my dad, and he really wanted me to work in his store, and I loved the store and I loved working there, and I ended up doing that when I went to college, and then I came home, worked in the store, and he was always talking about like adding a food element to the store, like, oh, he used to say maybe we can put a bakery in here and maybe we could put but it never happened. And then, a few years after I got home from college, unfortunately the store stumbled on some tough times, and what felt like it was going to be you know one route for the future, very quickly, that option faded away, and so it was, and the store ended up, I want to say, going through a pretty difficult Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and ultimately, it became, not a viable option for any of us, and so, my dad, who, you know had put his entire life into this. He was about 75 at the time, and he had worked this had been his career, his life's work, 48 years. um he was tired. He was just very tired, especially having it come to an end like that. But me, I was young, and I had the advantage of age at that time, and a little bit of naivete. And after seeing, you know I guess, being close to my dad, and I was pretty, there's a lot of emotion around how the situation happened, and I really wanted to, I don't know, somehow create something out of this mess,
yeah.
and I also needed a job at that point. So it was like I needed a job, and I need to figure out what to do next in my life. And I had been playing around with, I had been learning a lot about charcuterie actually in my spare time, and I was and I was fascinated about the whole, like the way you can take this highly perishable raw material, which is raw meat, and by leaving it in the zone where it's most prone to perish, you actually make it do the opposite of perish, right? You add value to it, you elevate it, you turn it into something long lasting. And so that sort of felt like that whole, triumph of human ingenuity, for lack of a better term, was really inspiring to me. And it felt, just felt like an amazing thing. And it felt like there was a metaphor in that, or I should, where, we've talked a little bit about transformation, but like there's this metaphor of transformation where you're transforming something that's young and unformed and you're sort of like guiding it through this beautiful process where if you do it right, it will become more valuable and turn into something really beautiful and delicious, and also like it won't go bad on you. So I started experimenting, and and then I decided one day that to give it a try as a business. I realized at that time, I mean still, but for many years there's been this sort of, I don't want to call it a resurgence, but there's been sort of more of a focus on quality and on ingredients and on process and for lack of a better word, maybe purity in the American food movement, right? And so I would go, and I remember in 2010 when Italy opened their first store in New York, I went to the store shortly after it opened. I walked around and I saw, there was, the cheese category had tons of producers in it, and the chocolate category had a bunch of producers, and all the categories seemed to have so many producers, so much diversity. But the salumi category had like 2 or 3 producers, domestically doing what felt to me like really high quality product. So, I thought, hey, maybe there's an opportunity here.
Yeah.
Now I understand why it was probably less crowded, because there's a lot of barrier to entry and there's a lot of regulation and there's a lot of, but that's kind of how that's how kind of how, yeah, exactly. And, that's exactly it. And so I decided to give it a try, and, one thing led to another, and here we are all 13 years later. And, so,
When
yeah.
you started doing it, when you just started experimenting and were doing it, in these early stages, did you do most of it like in your home kitchen? Did you have links
Yeah.
hanging up over the bathroom curtain on?
Literally. I mean, my dad had this old Sanyo. I don't know if you remember the brand Sanyo refrigerator. It was like a little office fridge, and it was from the 80s, and it looked like once upon a time it was really like a stylish thing to have in your office. But like by the time, so he just gave it to me, and I turned that into a curing box, and I put it in my house, and so I had my salamis curing in the little refrigerator in my kitchen.
Yeah.
And then I had I had some whole muscle products. I had a bresaola and I had a lomo, and I was curing those in my living room behind the TV, where I was living with a couple of friends at the time, and we had a TV in the living room, and behind the TV, like I had set up this little rod, and I was hanging a bresaola and a lomo. And one day I got home and there was this cat in our house, and I thought, I've never, I was not thinking of getting a pet or anything. And I thought, like, had this conversation, I looked at my room, I'm like, what's going on here? Why do we have a cat in the house? So, oh, the cat followed me home, and I felt bad. I didn't want to live. Oh man. And then the next day I got home and my bresaola was half missing because like the bresaola that I had going, and it was the craziest thing. It was like the only one that I had. I had had it there for almost 2 months, waiting for it to dry, seeing what would happen to it. And it turned out this cat was like, but so it was like it was just one of those stories where,
in the entire world.
and the cat was just looking at me when I got home, like, like nothing. I thought, oh my God. So, but yeah, so anyway, it was very,
Well,
yeah,
so you may
exactly.
have
So
something good. The cat gave it its seal of approval, which is a good sign. But how did you learn how to do all this? Did you take
yeah,
books? Did you have a mentor?
yeah,
Where did you learn the methods?
yeah. It's a great question, Peter, and it's one that I think that maybe there's a slightly roundabout answer. Sometimes I feel like with this business, I wouldn't change anything for it, but I guess I come from the school of like there's only one way of starting, and that's to start.
Yeah.
and you kind of learn as you go. So in retrospect, I thought, there's a lot that I still don't know, obviously, but at that time there was a lot that I thought I knew, and man, I didn't know close to anything. And so but I was reading a lot of books, and I was talking to a lot of people, and I did a short culinary program at the French Culinary Institute in New York, um, and and there was a charcuterie teacher there, and I was like always trying to figure out what he had going on. And then there was a short time where I lived in North Carolina for a brief period, in between these lives, and I was a cook at a restaurant down there, and the chef was always doing in-house charcuterie. So I picked up little things along the way. But you know, when I started, um, I feel like I was incredibly lucky to kind of take on this mentor when I got started. The way I got started was, I didn't have a lot of money to get this project going, and I certainly did not know very much about how the USDA worked. So my idea was to figure out, a place that was already set up to do this, and then call them up and see if they would let me, go in and make my product. You know, and for about 6 months, I would just get the phone shut on me. I started my search in New York, and then, it would be like, click, 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 click. No, I would tell them my story. Hey, my name is Charles, and da 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 da. And it was like nobody either. There weren't very many facilities that were approved to do this. The facilities that were approved to do this, a lot of them were at capacity. And then the ones that weren't at capacity, they didn't want anything to do with like a 20-something kid who had
Right.
never done this before. And, they thought it was some kind of a joke. So one day, so that was like the first 6 months of Charlitos, getting the phone slammed to my ear, whatever. And then one day I caught wind of a place that was in St. Louis, Missouri, a little salumeria, old school place, had been around since the 40s, grandfathered into a lot of the USDA regulation. And so on Friday afternoon, I just called them up, fully expecting to get the phone shut, slammed in my ear. And, you know, and I was this close to just like, saying, what, I gave it a good try, and this project is not going to happen. And I got this older lady on the phone. Hello, super Midwestern accent, kind of like a little rough around the edges. And I told her my story, and hey, my name is Charles, blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, she said, well, why don't you come down here and let's have lunch on Tuesday and let's talk about it. And I was floored, and I was like, what did you say? What did you say? I was shocked, was that a yes? And so I ended up going to St. Louis, of all places. And I had lunch with her name was Judy, and she was, an amazing woman. And you know, she helped me in ways that I can't even describe. And I say, like, for everybody along the way has an angel, going above and beyond what they're supposed to do for them. And for me, that person was Judy. If it wasn't for her, Charlitos would never exist. So she was the owner of this little place. And then she said, all right, let's give it a try. And we started making small test batches. And then from there, I traveled to St. Louis for a 1 week out of every month for the next 2 years to make salami. It happened was she had a 4-person crew working there, and the crew was headed up by this guy. His name was Jose, and Jose was from Mexico, and he had been working there for 16 or 17 years. He was incredible, like amazing. Didn't say much, but I would get there on like a Monday morning, and I would say, Judy, Judy would say, okay. She used to call me Carlos. She used to say, okay, Jose, Carlos is here. We're going to make his products and going to help out. And, I got to go or whatever. I don't know. She had something going on. So she would literally give me the key, and I would work with Jose and his crew. And that's how I learned, to be honest with you. And the first batches were small. And, you know, and,
That's great, because that's how it happens.
and that's it. And, and it took a lot, and it was a lot of like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you had people who knew what they were doing, willing to essentially let you do a stage there, and apprentice yourself with them, and then it starts to, I guess you could say, you start to learn through osmosis at that point. I'm looking at your
That's
website.
exactly what it was. That's exactly.
Yeah, so I'm looking at your website for it. I'm just going to read a couple of things on here, and
Yeah,
it kind of goes with the story. First of all, you say uh,
sure.
uh, our dry cured salamis are influenced by the curing traditions of Southern Europe, particularly Spain. And we also pride ourselves on being part of the diverse landscape of American
Yeah.
food producers, with our identity rooted in the diversity and melting pot of our hometown, Queens, New York City. So going back to that note about Spain, is there? We think of charcuterie and as French and Italian, but you called out the Spanish style, which of course they have clearly their own style of cured meats as well. And I see, I know that some of the ones you sent me fall in that,
Yeah.
but is that so? What's the difference, and what does this mean? The
Yeah.
Southern Europe, particularly Spanish influence.
So, for us, it's very important, at the root of our process is this notion of taking something that's super perishable, which is raw meat, leaving it in the zone where it's most prone to perishing, which is to say, 50 to 70 degrees, 75 degrees, for long periods of time, and transform and having it transform into something that's the opposite of perishing. So, our sort of the technique that we follow is that of air curing, that of air drying. So we don't incorporate any heat or any smoke.
Right.
I mean, into our products. I mean, we've done smoked and we've done heat treated products as like one-offs, but at the very core of what our line is, at the core of what we do, is really to showcase this process of slow curing, air drying at moderate temperatures that are not cooked, or super cold. And so that when I say Southern European, obviously these traditions exist everywhere in the world, not just in Southern Europe. But obviously in parts of Southern Europe, Spain, Italy, France, you find salamis like salamis like these are very common. And we reference Spain, just because the first product that we ever made was a chorizo seco, which is like this right here, which we'll taste. And it was inspired just because there was this restaurant that I used to go with my dad when I was younger. It was like, I call it like our date spot. It was like where we would go when we would just have dinner, just the two of us, And it was a Spanish restaurant, old school Spanish restaurant in New York, and they had this appetizer which was just like like a broiled chorizo, with it was just sliced up and thrown under a broiler for a minute or so and served with some onions. And it was just so simple and so delicious. And it was like you tasted it, and it was just like it was just it was like a paprika pimenton burst in your mouth.
Yeah.
It was just like the ultimate taste of place. And it was a nostalgic food for me for many years. And when I started doing this, I was like, that was really what got me going on our first product.
Yeah.
And so that's why we reference Spain. Yeah.
Emotional connection with this particular, food, this flavor and everything else. So of course, great place to start the company. We're going to taste your chorizo in a
Yeah.
second. I wanted to work up to that one through some of the other maybe less spicy versions. Um, uh,
Yeah.
so you got going, but I want to go back to something you just said about forming this product. Almost, it's like one person would say you're spoiling it. You're contaminating it. It's
Yeah.
loaded with bacteria. Is that what's happening? Is this kind of a type of bacterial fermentation that's taking place in the meat?
Yeah. 100%. So this is exactly what it is. So, there's two things that essentially make this product safe to eat, at the end of the day. There's one is reduction in pH, so making it more acidic, and we achieve that by a process of fermentation. And obviously, as there's a million different ways to ferment and a million different products of fermentation. And then after fermentation, the second thing that we do is we dry it, right? And so we make it dry, dry enough so that we we create an environment that's dry enough so that inhospitable bacteria, or really most bacteria, cannot proliferate. So it's acidity and dryness. And we can get into it. I don't know how deep you want to go into it, but
magic of
yeah,
making salumis is fermentation and dry curing. That's the curing
yeah,
concept. And
that's
then after
exactly
that,
it.
it's all
That's
about
exactly
ingredients and about adjusting temperatures to create different kinds of flavors. Is that part of the craft?
that. 100%. So it's, there's so many different ways to approach the fermentation. There's ways to achieve the fermentation quickly. There's ways to achieve it slowly. I would, one question that I often get is, what makes your salami different from, like, let's say a more commodity salami, like a boar's head or whatever you want, or whatever you say. And one of the things is the way in which we approach our fermentation. So we use a slow, lower temperature fermentation. So our goal is to, when we get raw meat, pH of raw meat is around 5.6, 5.7, maybe 5.8, depending. Our goal in the fermentation is to get it to between around 5.1 and 5.3. So at least 5.3, but not lower than 5.1. And then we want to do that slowly, right? Because if we do it quickly, then if we do it quickly and we go below 5.1, then you create a pronounced, I should say, like a pretty pronounced acidic flavor profile in the product. So if you've ever gone in and, like, ordered like a Genoa salami, whatever commodity salami, and in any deli, it has that characteristic, what I call a salami tang, right? It's like that salami, it's like what you can taste in most, salamis that you taste in the US, or that you can get in the US. And that the reason for that is, A, there's a starter culture involved in that is designed to produce that flavor. And B, it's being fermented at a higher temperature, so above 85 degrees, at a faster rate. And so it's usually achieved. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm trying to follow. So essentially, it's creating different kinds of acidity because different bacteria are either favored at that temperature or they just work more quickly and rapidly.
Yeah, so it's right. So it's like the starter culture. The starter. If you use a starter culture, then you're introducing a certain type of bacteria, what they call a lactic acid bacteria, right? And if you do the fermentation quick, and the faster you do the fermentation, and the lower you ferment the pH, the more pronounced the acidic flavor profile is going to be. So if you're going for a salami that's just tangy and acidic, well, then you can go for a fast fermentation, which is economically beneficial because, I mean, you lose less. For example, you lose less moisture in the process. You get to where you're going faster, and you narrow the window within which unhospitable bacteria can proliferate. So we say making salami is like waging a war between good and bad bacteria, right? So you want to preserve the good, and you want to make it inhospitable for the bad, but without sacrificing the integrity of the salami. So fast fermentation, high temperature, rapid pH drop, and pronounced acidity profile. Well, and usually that process can happen in less than 24 hours, usually 18. And but the way we do it, and depending on the type of product that we're making, so we do a lower temperature, slower fermentation, because I feel like if the product is too acidic, it's really hard to taste everything else that's going on in the salami. So you have the salt, you have the meat, you have the spices, and when we think about like what our ethos as a producer is, which is to take the smallest number of really awesome ingredients that we can get and just guide them through a process where they can all kind of commingle and hang out and create something beautiful, but in which none of them lose their integrity in the process. We owe it to these ingredients to do a slower fermentation, and the slower fermentation allows us to achieve the pH that we want, but also to have a less acidic flavor profile, so you can still taste the other characteristics of the salami. I think packaging for us has been one of the biggest challenges, especially over the years. Package, um, it's a living, breathing thing. It's got molds on the outside of it. And as soon as you package it, you're you're cutting off the circulation, you're cutting off its exposure to even like the product that I sent you. It was packaged. The weather's getting warmer. It was overnight in FedEx in a UPS, and and if you compare it to like the product that I have here, it looks a little different. And so um, we've gone through many renditions of packaging. We've gone through using special, I haven't found, there's not that many specialty charcuterie papers out there, but there's a lot of specialty cheese papers. Spent a lot of time, we went through a whole period where we wrapped our salami in a custom cheese paper that was breathable, but that was also, grease proof. So you're dealing with things like bleeding, drying, unwanted mold proliferation, protection against the different elements. So really, this product doesn't want to be packaged. And so we have a paper now that has a poly lining to it, and we're actually in the process of changing our packaging again, to try to see if this will work a little bit. And because we're selling in retail, if we were just selling over the counter in our own shop, the need for packaging would be less relevant. But because we're selling through wholesale channels, into retail stores, they need to it needs to look, I don't know, we've got to have something to put it on the shelves.
Well, can you tell us what about the Campo itself, and why is it called Campo, and how is it different from some of the other salamis?
No, I love it. I love it, and I love that your nation was to start with. It's called Campo. Campo means country. So we call this the country style salami. And to me, when I think of country, obviously, it's a word that just evokes simplicity, right, and minimalism. And what this is the salami that showcases the most fundamental elements of this process in their purest form. So you have the meat and you have the salt. So you have pasture raised heritage breed pork, no synthetic hormones, no antibiotics. So really good meat, all vegetarian fed. So you have really good meat, and then you have solar evaporated, hand harvested sea salt. So this really beautiful solar evaporated sea salt. It's like a fleur de sel, and has a really wonderful flavor profile. It's super mild, mellow, gentle, and so that's what the campo is. So it's the meat and the salt coming together and showcasing the two most fundamental ingredients in this process. Without either of them, the process doesn't work. So obviously everyone talks about the meat. We know that if you don't have meat, then it's not charcuterie. And if you don't have salt, well, chances are you're going to wind up with meat that's not safe to eat. So the campo is just the fundamental elements of this process, showcasing those two items. Like we call it the salami, the purest salami. It's the most versatile thing we make. Like bring it anywhere. It can pair with and everything builds out from this. So everything else that we make builds out from this. This is the foundation of everything else that we do.
This is kind of like the vanilla ice cream of salamis. It's the ground zero. Now
you could say that, yeah. I like to think about it more as the sweet cream of salami, because if you don't have good cream, then your chances of having good ice cream are significantly reduced. It's like, it's there I make the reference to bread. I think about this as I don't know, well, bread is usually just flour and water and maybe salt. But if you don't have good flour, then you're starting at a disadvantage.
Well, what kind of meat is it? This is a particular breed? Is it pork? Is it all pork?
Yeah. So right now everything that we do is pork. And we work primarily with Berkshire pork. So this is a heritage breed, a type of heritage breed, which is to say a pure breed of pig. Sometimes some of the pork that we use is a what they call a heritage cross. which is to say it's one breed mixed with another. It's still a far cry from what's available on the commodity market, but it's essentially, you know, it's like comparing an heirloom tomato to like a store-bought tomato in the wintertime. They're two totally different things, and one has an element of purity and I should say, hate to use the word integrity because it's has all sorts of implications, but like one is pure, one I just think one is better, one is of a much better quality. And the pigs that we use are let me just to finish that thought. So all the pigs that we use are raised, you know, with access to the outdoors, fed, and all vegetarian diet. They're never administered any sort of antibiotics or synthetic growth hormones. So you know, the quality of the raw material, you know, it is just much better from the outset.
Mainly raised, and you can
Yeah.
taste it. I mean, the flavor is very complex.
Yeah.
Like you say, the sort of the most basic of all your products. It's the flavor is complex. What
Yeah.
kind of spices are in there? Is there a little bit of garlic in there? It tastes like it might pick up garlic notes.
Yeah. So on the campo, it's just salt. There's no
Only
other
salt.
spice in there.
It's just
So it's
meat
just
and
salt.
salt. So this,
It's
so what
just
I'm
meat and salt.
pure flavor of the meat itself in this transformed, you know,
Right.
advanced state. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take that a step further. So as far as the, you know, you're tasting meat, the meat and the salt, but you know, one of the ingredients, you know, people say, how's your salami different? Well, one of the ingredients in this process is the process itself. So it's the fermentation, it's the drying, it's the bacteria, the unique bacteria that's present in our drying rooms. So you're tasting all of that. But as far as like added spices, you know, we're keeping it really, really minimal. Again, like it's been a fundamental belief since day one of our production that if you use really outstanding raw materials, you don't need to do you don't need a lot. And so you know, it's like you know, I heard this term recently. I don't know who said it, but it really resonated. It's like we're very intentionally restrained in terms of what we put into our products. So we try to use as few ingredients as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
And
Let the
yeah, yeah,
the pure ingredients shine through. Well, it does. It really does.
yeah, totally.
I believe that what I was just tasting was just simply pork and meat. That's of
Yeah.
course, I like to say I'm tasting time, I'm tasting temperature, I'm tasting
Hmm.
bacterial activity, the fermentation, the acidity, everything that you've created. And again, as a parallel, so much of the fermentation world in general, whether it's cheese or bread
Yeah.
or beer or wine, it's all about, you know, this biological activity that's transforming one thing into something else. It's really remarkable as I eat this
Yeah.
with those thoughts in mind, which we rarely do when we eat, you know, when we eat
Yeah.
salami at a restaurant or at the table, we just chomp down on it, you know, dip
Yeah.
it in mustard, whatever. But in tasting it and really chewing it, I'm amazed at how complex it is. So I want to move
Yeah.
to another product of yours called the trufa,
Yeah.
which
Trufa.
is which has the wonderful aromatic of truffle. I'm guessing it's a black or white truffle.
Yeah, exactly. So we use a black truffle. We use a black truffle in this salami, and this is just, you know, salt. And here I can show it to you here as well. So it's just salt, black truffle, and we use these really beautiful black truffles that come from the Abruzzo region of Italy. We also some of them also come from Provence in the south of France, and we have a really amazing truffle supplier that I've been working with for a number of years. He's based in New York, and he gets us really amazing stuff. And we use so actually in this salami, so we use it's the meat, it's the truffle, and we also use a different type of salt. So we use a sel gris in this salami. So in the other salamis, we use a solar evaporated fleur de sel, which is a salt that's whiter in color, also really good. But this is I mean, this one is, you know, has a little bit of a higher price tag, which is why we don't, you know, which is why we just keep it to the trufa. But it's a sel gris. It's a solar evaporated sel gris from the Garonne region of France. And the reason that we use this type of salt over the other is because it's even milder, even gentler, you know, we're big here on what I call unsalty salt, you know, so it's salt that's mellow in flavor profile. When you put it on your tongue, it doesn't give you that like what I call the salt burn, right? It's kind of like makes your face contort a little bit.
Like,
Really, really gentle. So this sel gris also really, really gentle, even mellower. Truffles are finicky. They're hard to work with, you know, because they lose their flavor very quickly. And so, you know, and they like to be, I would say they like to be the star of the show. So I know there's a million truffle products out there right now, you know, and a lot of it is sort of synthetic and chemically, and you know, feels like maybe it's getting too far away from what an actual truffle is. When we were making this product, and this is, by the way, the first product that we sold. The first product I was making was a chorizo, but when we got into production, we started making this, and that was what allowed us to generate our first dollar in business, which was a nice feeling. But you know, truffles like to be the star of the show. So the idea here was to just let it be the star of the show and try to bring everything else as a supporting character. You know, so the salt, the meat, you know, again, this is where the fermentation comes in. So slow fermentation. So you really need to minimize that acidity as much as possible, so you can have some truffle forwardness. So yeah, that's what this product is.
Yeah, the truffle really.
Yeah, and I think that this is actually a good time. Yeah, thanks, Peter. And you know, while we're on that note, I feel like this is a good time to introduce one other. I like to call it an ingredient, but this is an ingredient, how you slice it, right? So I don't know, and you can see on my board here, we have the 3 salamis. So you have hand sliced, and these have, you know, about a 1/8 inch thickness or so, and that's just like a, you know, charcuterie, right? And then you have machine slice here. So I have this, you know, and what we do often is we slice lengthwise. So here when you slice lengthwise, not only do you get a different product articulation, but you get a different flavor profile, and it lends itself to a lot more versatility in the ways in which you present it. So obviously, if you're doing a charcuterie board, but you know, you can speak to this a lot, obviously a lot more than I can, but you know, I love pizza. You know, we you know, it's always been a goal to work with awesome pizza makers everywhere. And what I love to do is like, so we'll slice like this lengthwise on the slicer, and this allow and like finish a pizza with it. So pizza's fresh, like let's say like a tartufo pizza bianco or whatever.
Yeah.
You fire the pizza off in the oven, minimal ingredients, it comes out, it's hot, it's giving off a lot of residual heat. Now when you slice thinly like this,
Yeah,
you can just kind of like
those
pile.
let me explain for the people who are just listening to the audio version of this.
Yeah.
What you're holding up is like paper thin, super thin sliced sheets of whatever. What's the kind you're holding in your hand right now?
Right. So yeah, you know, we're talking about the truffle, so I'm holding the truffle.
The truffle.
And
so then you can lay that on top of the
but
hot pizza.
that's exactly it. It's super thin. That's exactly it. And the residual heat from the hot pizza will really open that up and create something very beautiful. And so it's not only the shape, it's the thickness, and so you know, so you can obviously, this is paper thin, this is a full millimeter, so it gives you a little more control over creating shape. So again, I like to talk about that because, you know, we're talking about ingredients and we're talking about, I mean, especially with the truffle and letting the truffle shine, but there's so many variables in this process. And I think one of the variables that, you know, part of my job in educating people on how to eat this product is really to let them know that, like, you have this one more ingredient that is at your disposal, that is in your control when you consume this product, and that is how you slice it. Literally, doesn't matter how, whatever, no pun intended. And so it really changes the flavor profile. It changes the eating experience. And if you're deliberate about it, it opens up a whole world of possibility in terms of how versatile this product can be.
That's a good thought. And for instance, I hand sliced I'm holding up a slice right now of your
Yeah,
chorizo, and that I hand sliced, and of course
yeah,
I'm slicing it at about a little more than a quarter of an inch thick. So I'm just wondering that should I be
yeah.
slicing thinner? Should I make to get more of the essence of the flavor? Is thinner better, generally speaking?
No
Not necessarily.
point. There's no better or worse or anything. It's whatever feels good and however you like it. First of all, number one is however you like it. That's the most important thing. What feels the best to you.
Yeah.
You know, the and number two is, you hear the term intention thrown around a lot. If it's what you're going for and what your intention is with the product. So I think just looking at me, you did an amazing. That's a beautiful slice right there that you did. Um, my reason in explaining this is not to say that one is right or wrong or better or worse. On the contrary, it's just to show some options.
Well,
You know.
now that I've kind of tapped into this chorizo, which I'm loving, I'm like, holy cow, I could see
Yeah.
why there's and again, as you were talking about, there's more work here than just the meat and the salt. There's your
Yeah.
history with this product, your connection to this product, and
Yeah.
the emotional connection that you have. But this is
Yeah.
it's so different than any chorizo I've had before. And I'm also seeing that you make an uncured chorizo stick that
Yeah.
that is it the same product just in a different form, or is it a totally different product?
Yeah. It's a very, very similar product. It's essentially the same thing in biteable, transportable, longer lasting form. Just looking at some ways to diversify the line a little
I
bit.
love it because
And
this reminds me from my childhood of my favorite snack product, Slim Jims. This looks like a chorizo Slim Jim, and
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
taking these with me on a trip and just kind of going through them, like plowing through them. To talk about flavor burst. This
Oh,
chorizo
that's
has
exactly
an
what.
incredible flavor burst, and I think that you said earlier, there's the pimento is probably uh, uh, the predominant spice, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly it. And it again in the spirit of being intentionally restrained, and it's about how little we do and not how much we do to this. That this is this product is just pimentón. We use a very, very tiny bit of garlic, but it's a beautiful it's a beautiful pimentón. It's a pimentón from the La Vera region of Spain. So it's literally these beautiful peppers that are lightly smoked over an open oak wood fire for approximately 16 or so hours and dried. And so they absorb this really just sort of intoxicating smokiness, but it's not like in your face smoky. It really builds a lot of character in that process. And then when they're dry, they're milled into a powder. And I tell you, like, there are certain moments in my life of doing this type of work, and one of the moments I'll never forget is the first time I opened up a 50 whatever it was, a 50-kilo sack of pimentón, and I tore off the top and opened the bag, and the aroma just hit me, and I just thought, man, like,
Yeah,
this is amazing. This stuff is just magical. And
yeah,
like, it really, when you talk about how like one ingredient can completely change something, or the power of ingredients, you know for us, the chorizo has always been a really wonderful example of that. And I remember when I opened the bag, and I remember when I dipped the scoop in the bag for the first time, to weigh out the spices for that first batch that we used with this pimentón. And is like, the closer it got to my nose, just the stronger it got. And I just thought, man, like, it almost felt unfair. I'm like, this stuff is so good. you know this
yeah.
stuff is so good. Is like, we're not really, so much of the work has already been done for us, and how awesome
Well, that's it. And like
this pimentón.
we've interviewed some great winemakers over the years in our show, and they
Yeah,
always say, my job is to get out of the way, is so that you can taste the pure essence of this grape, and I don't screw it up.
yeah, man,
Well,
that's
speaking of the pimento,
perfectly said.
later you make some popcorn. I say smoky and
Yeah,
delicious papolito, which
yeah.
using the same pimento, I'm imagining.
That's exactly it. So I mean, over the years, it's always been a hope that we could diversify the line a little bit, and ideally make something that goes well with charcuterie, but doesn't get regulated by the U.S. government as closely as this stuff, and has a little bit less of a processing time. And there's a really awesome popcorn maker up in my area where I live. They're called Bjorn Corn, and their popcorn's delicious. And one day, I was making popcorn with my daughter on a Sunday. We were hanging out, and I had a thing of the container of the paprika, of the pimenton that we use, and the popcorn was popping, and I saw the paprika, and I thought, let me just dust it over and see what happens. It was really good. And so I was, called up Bjorn Corn and asked if they wanted to do a collaboration, and they agreed to it. And so yeah, we just released this product, and I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, it's cool. And of course, that leads to, before we run out of time, I need to ask you,
Yeah,
what other
yeah,
products do you currently have and are planning to come out with soon? And for
yeah,
people who are listening and watching to know that they can get to your website, they go to Charlito's Cocina, right?
yeah. Charlito's Cocina, the Spanish word. So
Cocina, Cocina.
yeah, yeah,
Charlito's Cocina. Go to the website because everything is there, including you have a nice FAQ section that talks about what differentiates your products from others and how
yeah,
do, and your mission statement, which I think is really important too. Which is probably your value system is expressed there, and I think that we talked about a lot of that today. So
yeah,
people to go to that site. But what are some of the other products that you're either thinking about coming out with
yeah.
or already have tasted today?
Okay. Yeah, yeah. No, thanks for saying all that stuff. So we have the snack sticks, like you mentioned. So we're doing those in 2 flavor profiles. So we have all of our small format salamis, which come in 5 flavor profiles. It's the campo, as we talked about, the trufa, the black truffle, the mild chorizo. We also do it's a call it cerveza seca. This is a salami made with a Belgian style quad ale, and it's a collaboration with a brewery in New York City called Transmitter Farmhouse Ales. They're doing really beautiful beers, and they basically do a variation on an Abbey style quad ale just for us. That's a really nice product as well. And then we do a salami picante, which is a spicy salami with a little splash of cognac in it, and it's by far the busiest thing that we do. It's got 5 types of chilies in it. It's got a chile piquin, árbol chile, cayenne chile, and a little bit of smoked spicy pimenton, so like the spicy version of what was in the chorizo. And then we finish it with a splash of cognac to sort of give it a little bit of sweetness. So it's pretty spicy. So the cognac kind of cuts through the intensity of the spice, and helps us round out the flavor. So it's small format salami. It's pre-sliced. We have all the flavors in a pre-sliced format. Also the snacking sticks, and we also we have a whole food service program. So for like all the pizzaiolos out there and restaurants, and people who are looking to do stuff for their restaurant, definitely hit us up. We have a whole program for that as well.
I see. Let me just ask you about that dry cured beer salami, the cerveza
Yeah,
seca. Does the beer actually work into the meat itself and cured with the meat?
exactly. So we treat it as a spice. So we treat it as a spice. So it goes right in there with the salt, um, and really it you lose a lot of the beer in the curing process, right? Like salami is dry, beer is wet. So we lose about 50% of the moisture in our curing process. So what you're left with is a lot of the nuance of the beer. So the cerveza is similar to the campo, but it's more layered. You're going to have some sweetness, some maltiness, some yeastiness. It's really good. I got to send you some.
Love the sound of it. One other product I want to ask you about. You have
Yeah,
something called sopressata, which looks
yeah,
to me like almost like what I think of as induja, kind of a
yeah,
paste made from it's like a more like a spread and not a sliceable, but a kind of a what would you call it? How would you describe this
yeah,
sopressata?
yeah.
Not the same as sopressata, which is
Yeah,
another type of salami. But what is the soppressata?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, you hit it on the nose. I mean, and if you're familiar with Nduja, it's in the same family. So it's a cured and spreadable salami, and it's actually has a longer curing period than many of the products we do. So the sobrasada is similar to Nduja in that it's spreadable, but it's just a different flavor profile, different spices. So whereas an Nduja is traditionally made with Calabrian chilies and it's a little spicy and it's spicier, the sobrasada is more of like a spreadable chorizo. So ours, just like the chorizo, is totally mild, and it's just paprika, and we use a little bit of gin in it, so which again helps to brighten it up a little bit, and talking about rounding out flavor profiles and creating balance, and also like some differentiation and exploring, kind of like showcasing local terroir and stuff, that adding a little bit of local spirit allows us to do it. So yeah, spreadable salami,
I can't wait to try that. That looks, it just looks
yeah,
awesome.
I gotta
Let me
thank you, Peter.
let people know that we're, for those who just joined us, that I'm talking with Charles, and then you pronounce your last name Wekselbaum, correct? Wekselbaum?
Yeah.
Charles
Yep.
Wekselbaum, who's the founder of Charlito's Cocina, and we've been talking all about the difference between salami and salumi. We've talked about charcuterie as a category. This is a whole world unto itself, and in many ways, what excites me about it is that while we're talking about all of this, I'm thinking how this parallels so much my world of bread and dough, and how it parallels the beer making. When you're putting beer into your meat mix, it's basically fermentation on top of fermentation.
Yeah.
It's essentially, we're talking about all the same thing: natural biological fermentation activity, transforming ingredients from one thing into something totally other. And it sounds like you've really tapped into the essence of that. I wanted to read one more thing, and that is simply this mission statement of yours. Before we lose you completely, I want to just remind people that this is the mission of Charlitos. The mission is to make the world a more human, more loving, more kind, and more empowering place. We do this by creating cured meats and complementary foods that are sustainably made, transparent, and delicious. Our food is a vehicle that exists to bring people closer, to foster nourishment, and to cultivate longevity and gastronomic tradition. So, Charles, all I can say is thank you so much for sharing your passion, your vision, and your wonderful salumi today with us that we've been tasting throughout the show. And thank you for coming on Pizza Quest and being part of this again, this celebration of artisanship wherever we find it.
Well, thank you to you, Peter. I mean, you've been a big inspiration over the years, and it's been a real privilege and an honor to be on your show. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, when I get up to New York, we'll have to we'll make some bread together, and then we'll spread some of this soppressata on top of it, because I want to put those two things together.
I love it. I'm gonna send you a follow-up box of
all
stuff.
right, well, we'll talk about that. And I want to thank all of you for hanging in there with us today. We had some technical problems with the feed, but we covered a lot of ground. I learned way more than I expected to learn today about this process of transformation of meat into salami and salumi. Charles, best of success as you grow Charlitos, and all of you, thank you for joining us today on Pizza Quest. We'll see you at the next episode.